Doug Ford and the Progressive Conservative Party have won the Ontario election. This marks his third consecutive term as Premier.
Together we have made history. Together we have secured a strong, historic third majority mandate.
In a rare winter snap election, many voters went to the polls with concerns, of course, tariffs, healthcare, the economy, housing, despite facing stark criticism from his opponents over his handling of the Greenbelt and the crisis in healthcare. Doug Ford won a third mandate focused on fighting back against these proposed U.S. tariffs. To break it all down, let's welcome back Rachel Siegel, political strategist and founder of Beyond a Ballot podcast. Nice to see you again.
Nice to see you.
Okay, so let's continue the conversation we started yesterday. Now that we have results, Doug Ford said this snap election was called so he could have a strong mandate. Do you think he got it?
Well, I think he absolutely got it. I think his goal was to ensure that the next 4 years he would be in office with his team in order to make a plan for going up against Donald Trump and whatever the next 4 years have to bring. So I think that that's a big distinction because a lot of people are thinking about the tariffs issue, but what Doug Ford is also thinking about and put to voters was this is only the beginning. We have 4 more years and we need the stability in Ontario to be able to deal with whatever might come up. And that could go far beyond tariffs. Hopefully it doesn't, but it could. And so I think that what Doug Ford put to voters, what he put out as the ballot question, it's stuck throughout the campaign. We talked about that yesterday, and now ultimately paid off for Doug Ford in the form of returning a third straight majority. We have to remember this has not happened in Ontario since the 1950s. So a big historic night for the PCs last night.
Yeah, pretty huge. Not a great night for Bonnie Crombie. Let's talk about her. For second Ontario Liberal leader and former Mississauga mayor, Bonnie Crombie failed to win a seat, but she is vowing to remain on as leader. Is getting the Liberals back to official party status enough for her to stay on? What do you think?
So for me, Doug Ford actually wasn't the story of the night. I mean, it was historic. We kind of all were feeling that this is what was going to be the outcome. The story of the night was Bonnie Crombie. We were watching that riding, whether or not she would win her own seat. When she didn't win it, I think all of the politicos in Canada went, wow, that's a huge move, something pretty unexpected. And so Bonnie came out last night and she said that she's not going anywhere. The thing is, in politics, when you're the leader, it's not really your decision. There's an entire team around you. She will go to a leadership review, which is mandatory under the Ontario Liberal Party. And so it'll be really interesting for Bonnie over the next few months how she navigates this outcome. She won't have a seat as leader in the legislature. That's not crazy. We've seen that in other legislatures. For example, Naheed Nenshi in Alberta, who's the leader of the opposition, doesn't have a seat currently. So she can get through that. The question is, will her party let her continue on as leader, or will they say, we need to go into a leadership race? Lindsay, you have to remember the federal Liberals are in a leadership race right now. And I'm hearing from a lot of them saying, please, no, we can't go into another leadership race. So I think that the federal team and whether or not we go into a federal election in a couple of weeks will really play into Bonnie Crombie's fortunes over the next few months.
Let's look at the seat breakdown. Conservatives with 80 seats, NDP with 27 seats, Liberals with 14, Greens with 2, and Independent 1. So let's talk about the NDP now, because the NDP remains the official opposition. But were these election results considered a disappointment for the party? What do you think?
No, not at all. If you saw Marit Stiles yesterday, and I spoke to her a couple of weeks ago, and they were really pushing to ensure that they sustained themselves as the official opposition in Ontario. Marit is a phenomenal communicator. She's somebody to watch. I've been watching her for a few years, and there was a lot of question about whether or not she'd be able to pull this off. Obviously, again, going back to the story of the night, Bonnie Crombie was a fierce opponent. She's a woman who's held a position in every level of government. And so the question was, will Marit be able to do this? If you watched the NDP commentators last night on television, many of them very happy. I think there's a huge sigh of relief in the Ontario NDP party this morning.
So you and I were talking yesterday about voter turnout and what we were expecting. How did that turn out?
So surprisingly, voter turnout was at about 43%. And we anticipated, based on advanced polls being at about 6%, that we wouldn't see a great turnout. I mean, 43% historically in Toronto, in Ontario, is not great, but it is equitable to the 2022 campaign. So the last campaign was about on par with what we saw yesterday. Obviously, it would have been better to have more people get out and vote. But I think that for a snap election at the height of winter, and I was out door knocking yesterday, climbing over snowbanks in the last hour. But it was great to see that there was comparable voter turnout as we saw in the last campaign.
I will say I went to 2 polling stations. Don't ask me why, but I went to 2, and they were pretty steady. And one of the comments that somebody that was volunteering there was saying, a lot of people didn't have their voter card because this happened so quickly. Said a lot of people just they didn't have access to that, which I thought was an interesting note. Hey, Rachel, nice to see you again. Thanks for the follow-up today.
You too, Lindsay. Talk to you soon.
And you as well.
If you like that video, make sure to subscribe to the Your Morning YouTube feed, where you can find all kinds of new content posted every weekday morning.